Iran is threatening a complete halt on peace talks after trading strikes with the U.S. over the weekend. Both sides claimed attacks on each other's resources on Saturday and again on Sunday. But a Washington official says talks will continue as President Trump issued an aggressive threat that the U.S. military will complete the job, quote, end quote, if Iran doesn't comply with a ceasefire. Let's bring in CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi. Yeah, it feels like we've been here many, many times before for the last almost 4 months, Olivia. It's sort of whiplash on whether the talks are on or off, whether we're in ceasefire or not, or whether it's full-blown war or it's not. What are you hearing about the status of those potential talks this morning?
Well, we actually just heard from the president on this himself. He wrote on Truth Social that Iran has requested a meeting and saying that it's going to take place tomorrow in Doha. This is also what we had been hearing from Pakistani officials, saying that despite the trading of fire this weekend between the U.S. and Iran, they're still planning to have these negotiations taking place in Doha. This is part of those negotiations that they're having about the Iran nuclear program. However, even though the U.S. is saying that this is happening, even though the president is saying that Iran requested this, the Iranians have not said whether or not they're going to show up in Doha for these talks. And even the Iranians were saying that no talks were scheduled for this weekend. So really continuing the pattern here that we have seen from the very start of this war, which is what the Iranians have been saying and what the U.S. has been saying, have been completely different. So we'll have to see just who from the U.S. side is going to go to Doha for these negotiations and whether the Iranians are even going to show up.
So, Olivia, as you know, so much was made of last week's memorandum of understanding. It was really lauded. But at this point, has that accomplished anything?
Well, in terms of getting some type of talks face-to-face happening, yes, but it appears the holdup really is over the Strait of Hormuz. Essentially, that is what is causing a lot of the difficulty here, because the U.S. and a UN-backed agency and the Omanis created a new shipping lane for ships to transit through the strait after the Iranians said that they're going to reopen the strait. However, the Iranians have been attacking those boats, saying that they want the boats to use the shipping lane closest to Iran, not the one in Oman, but the one in Iran. So that is causing a lot of issues in the region, and that's why we've seen Iran starting the strikes and then the U.S. starting those strikes again. So really, once again, it's all coming down to the strait, especially as the president is really trying to get gas prices back down, trying to get the world economy restarted, trying to keep the good energy flowing on Wall Street. But this is certainly causing some problems for these negotiations.
All right, Olivia Rinaldi, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Let's bring in CBS News national security analyst Aaron McLean. Aaron, you know, it almost feels as if the president continues to say that there is a ceasefire in effect because he realizes how detrimental it is to the markets, to oil prices, to gas prices back home. So giving the impression that there is a ceasefire in place perhaps quells those fears, but every day we're having the same discussion. Do you expect these talks are going to happen, and when could we see a permanent ceasefire that lasts longer than 24, 48 hours?
Well, as for talks, whether or not they happen tomorrow in Qatar or not, and as of this moment, it seems like they will. I think there'll be talks on and off in the weeks to come. Your second question about whether or not we get a ceasefire that lasts is much harder to answer. You know, another thing that the president, the administration say consistently is that Iran, as part of this MOU, agreed to open the Strait of Hormuz. Well, that's not exactly accurate. The text of the MOU is quite ambiguous on what opening the Strait of Hormuz means. And from the Iranian perspective, what it means is that they could administer traffic through the strait, that they will allow traffic through the strait so long as it's abiding by Iran's regulations. And what you saw, of course, on Thursday and then into the weekend was Iran taking shots at ships that had not registered with Iran for transit through the strait. And so this is the point of now armed dispute between the two countries with yet another round of fighting.
Aaron, can you shed some light on how Iran has been able to so effectively shut down the Strait of Hormuz? I mean, when you look at our two militaries, our two navies, we are clearly stronger. What is it that Iran has been able to do that has proven so challenging for the U.S. To not be able to stop them from shutting down the strait?
Well, if you think about, just walking down the street in a bad neighborhood, not everybody who not everybody who walks down the street has to get beat up for the general impression that the street is dangerous to get around and for people to not want to walk through it anymore. All you have to do is beat someone up every once in a while, and that's what Iran does here. You don't have to take a shot at every single ship for the word to get out that it's dangerous business sailing through the Strait of Hormuz, which it absolutely is. If you don't register with Iran, the Iranians might shoot at you. If you do register with Iran, by the way, that entity that does the registration, the Persian Gulf Strait Authority, has been sanctioned by the United States. So you're technically dealing with a sanctioned entity. It's a bit of a mess for shipping, and now you see these numbers way back down here at the start of the week, the numbers of ships going through the strait, which is going to have presumably impacts on the economy here in the days and weeks to come.
So let's talk about the Netanyahu factor. It seems every time there seems to be a breakthrough, Israel has a different position. I mean, it sort of feels like their position has always been the same, which is that they can't agree to anything that puts their security and their safety at risk. And when it comes to Hezbollah, a terrorist organization, who has, as part of its manifesto and its, ideals, the destruction of the state of Israel, it's hard for them to be on the same page if Hezbollah isn't a member or party, even though they're backed by Iran, of this memorandum. So how does that factor into all of this?
Yeah, no, well, you put it well. So the Israelis have, a major threat to their north in the form of Hezbollah, this Iranian proxy. There's been real progress between the governments of Israel and Lebanon just over the course of the last week in this parallel diplomatic process being run out of the State Department and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Not the same process, not the same cast of characters as the group that produced the Memorandum of Understanding with Iran, where essentially the governments of Lebanon and Israel have agreed to to essentially tying the withdrawal of Israeli forces from southern Lebanon to the disarming of Hezbollah. Obviously, Hezbollah is not a fan of this deal. People who support Hezbollah in Lebanon are not fans of this deal, and the Iranians are not fans of this deal. And it's very unclear, by the way, how it could actually be brought into effect anyway. But as a pure diplomatic moment, this has been something that's upset the Iranians. And by the way, the two issues are linked. What's going on in the Strait and what's going on in Lebanon, for the Iranians, it's all one bigger struggle. It's one bigger war. So when you see agitation like they've done in the Strait, I think it's worth considering how they think that's going to affect things in Lebanon, how that's going to re-seize the initiative for them and get talks moving in a direction that they're happier with.
All right, Aaron McClain, thank you so much for your analysis.